Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. Today we're going to be talking dollars and cents and trying to make sense of the New Jersey state budget, what it means to Trenton, what it means to businesses in the state, and what it means to you, the taxpayer. New Jersey has the highest corporate business tax in the nation. Christopher Emigholz is with New Jersey Business and Industry Association. He's standing by. He's going to be here to talk a little bit more about the cost of doing business in New Jersey. First up, we have a former New Jersey legislator, John Wisniewski. He served in the state legislature from 1996 to 2018, and he was a Democratic Party candidate for governor. Assemblyman, good to see you.
Good to be with you again, Laura. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to first start with a little news, and it was the case that was making national headlines, and that was the shooting death of Sayreville Councilwoman Eunice Dunford. They recently made an arrest in the case, and you're the family's attorney, so can you tell us something about the case?
Well, everyone was surprised. I mean, let's break it down. Mom and Dad were very hopeful that law enforcement agencies would be able to solve the riddle as to who and why someone chose to shoot Eunice Dunford. But it also raises so many more questions because the family, the sister, mom and dad, extended family really don't know anything about this suspect. They're not aware of any connection between their daughter and the suspect. They're not aware of any reason this person would have that kind of enormous animus towards Eunice to want to murder her. And so as one question gets answered for the family, the who, the nagging question now is why. What was it that motivated this person to think that this was the only solution to whatever troubled him to take their daughter's life?
Yeah. I mean, this is a rare occurrence, but I'm curious, and somebody as a former legislator yourself, have you heard from other elected officials, and are they concerned about their own safety? Because you don't know what the motivation is, if it was random or if there's some beef they had.
Right. Well, it's not totally random. This suspect was a member of the same religious organization, the same church that Eunice was a pastor in. They did several years back have some interactions, but it's a very long period of time between when they had more frequent interactions and today. And so it really raises the question. To your first point, though, elected officials and the concern, we've seen a whole host of candidates and elected officials at national levels glorify violence, almost condone violence. And so it is something that runs through people's minds whenever anything happens. Is this because they were an elected official, or is this because of something else? It's the desensitization of what used to be a norm, that violence was a taboo, that you didn't advocate for violence. We now seem to have a whole class of political office holders who seem to think that suggesting violence is a solution. And that worries not only office holders, but it really should worry everybody who participates in democracy, because that's not a recipe for success.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could probably do an entire show on that, violence and not at just the elected level, at schools and places where you just thought it didn't exist. But we'll save that one for another show. And I'm glad that you were able to give us an update and that there was an arrest or a suspect in the case. But I want to move on now to the state budget. The governor's proposed a $53 billion spending plan, a little bit more than $53 billion. Now it's in the hands of the legislature, and we're under a deadline. The budget has to be approved by June 30th. That's in the New Jersey State Constitution. So as a former member of the legislature, can you talk a little bit about what's going on right now? What kind of negotiations are happening?
Well, let's take a look at the lay of the land first. We came off a couple of years because of COVID relief money that the state of New Jersey had a very easy time putting together budgets. There was a lot of agreement. It wasn't hard to make sure that there was a balanced budget, but all good things must come to an end. And that gravy train that the state of New Jersey enjoyed, the robust economic activity that was that bump right after the lockdowns ended, has all come to an end, which means that the state of New Jersey is now, for the first time in several years, facing significant financial shortfalls. And the question that never gets answered well when you're putting a budget together in the last couple of days of June is, where does that money come from and who pays for it? This is a time when those decisions are often made very poorly. Just take a look at a couple of top lines. New Jersey Transit's facing almost $1 billion deficit coming up. Tax collections are down. The state is not collecting the money it needs to fund current operations. And then we have leaders who are talking about, well, maybe it's time that we provide tax cuts. These things all don't go together. I get the desire to reduce the property tax or the income tax burden, but we can't do it at the same time as we have huge gaps in our revenue, huge gaps in the money that's coming into the state. There has to be some rationality. And right now, I'm afraid that we don't have that. We're not seeing that.
Yeah. And it's like anybody who's balancing their own budget. If you don't have the money to pay for what you're spending, you've got to make cuts. You have to decide, make those tough decisions. Which kind of brings me to, like, when they're going through budget negotiations, you've been there. Is it more political, more of a power play? Is it about getting reelected when it comes to these negotiations, as opposed to what the reality of the fiscal responsibility of it all?
Well, I think fiscal responsibility is part of it, but I think it's down on the list. Let's not forget that there are 120 legislative seats that are up for re-election this year. That will in part inform the decisions that are made both on a leadership level in both houses of the legislature and by the rank and file. We've seen the discussion, right? It's not a secret that the state of New Jersey is running short of revenue under the current set of circumstances. No one's talking about how that revenue gets made up. Instead, we see, let's call it some pandering to either business entities or taxpayers saying, hey, we're going to cut taxes. You can't have a shortfall and cut taxes and continue to provide the same level of services. And this is the disconnect that happens, especially in a state like New Jersey, where every 2 years the entire assembly's up. Out of a 10-year cycle, you've got the Senate up with the assembly 2 occasions. It's not a good recipe for fiscal discipline, and I think the system has to change.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about his tax cuts? We know that the governor is at odds with the Democratic-controlled legislature. So can you talk a little bit about the sticking points this year?
Well, I think the governor is on the right track here. The fact is that a property tax cut has to be funded forever in the future, and property taxes will continue to go up. And so the state of New Jersey coming in and saying, we're going to provide this cut, is really agreeing right now for the foreseeable future to continue to put more money out in property tax relief. It's not solving the basic problem, which is we have too many layers of government. There needs to be a way of consolidating those layers of government so that we're not duplicating expenses, and providing the kind of broad-based tax cuts that are being talked about means that some very wealthy individuals will benefit enormously. Renters, people who don't have the privilege of owning their own home because they haven't been climbing the economic ladder, they get very little. It seems to be very unequal treatment and not good for long-term public policy.
Yeah. When you talk about one of the solutions, possibly, it's about sometimes consolidating services. New Jersey's a home rule state. So for as much as consolidation would make sense, sharing services, people like their local school districts, their local fire department, but all of those layers, as opposed to, county or again, sharing services, that's really hard to change.
Oh, it's enormously hard. But I also think that in that difficulty lies the solution. Every family has hard decisions to make about whether they buy a new car, whether they improve their home, whether they send their children to certain schools. These are everyday decisions that every family has to make. And the frustration that many voters have is that while they have to make those decisions, they have to live within a budget. They look at government and they see that government is providing tax cuts, increased spending, and they're just not sure how this is real. And I think that's part of where you see voters get disenchanted, right? They look at the process, they look at what's coming out of Trenton or the county seat or their local city hall, and they get frustrated. And there has to be a greater level of accountability in order to make the economics of New Jersey work, to continue to put money into property tax relief, but have this dual system in which municipalities raise property taxes to fund education, which is actually a statewide obligation, just is making the problem worse and worse year after year.
Yeah. When it comes to this year's budget, legislature has until midnight, June 30th. They must approve that budget must be balanced. If not, the government can shut down. We've seen it happen in years past. Do you think there's any chance there will be a government shutdown this year?
I think it's too early to say. There's certainly very hard lines being drawn between what the governor says he'll accept and what legislative leadership is proposing. But we all know that as you get closer to that deadline, a bit of reality sets in. People start to ask themselves, do we want to be responsible for a government shutdown and what that means? When you shut down government on July 1st, a few days before the 4th of July holiday, you run the risk of ruining a lot of plans for a lot of people. And so as we get closer to that deadline date, that deadline hour, I think there'll be a likelihood of greater compromise, reconciliation, and perhaps something that works for everybody.
Yeah. Last time it shut down, Chris Christie was in office, and that infamous picture of him on the beach is still haunting him to this day. Government shutdown does not go over well because the reality is it really does hurt people. You're so many things close, and I can see wanting to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that, it also depends upon the dynamic of the issue. If the issue is that there's a government shutdown because we can't provide property tax relief for the wealthiest New Jerseyans, I don't think that plays well.
Especially with the re-elections coming up. Well,
That's right.
I just mentioned to former Governor Chris Christie. I got to get in these last couple of minutes. Another former governor, Jim McGreevey. I had to do a double take on this because I was like, am I hearing this right? There's talk that he may return to politics and run for mayor of Jersey City. Is this true?
Well, anything is possible in the world of New Jersey politics, and certainly no one should be surprised that a former elected official who was forced out of office and had to resign in disgrace still harbors ideas that he can once again run for office. I think it's a mistake. I think, when you start bringing in people who were forced out of office in disgrace to run for mayor of Jersey City, you say to everybody else who spent many years on the council or in other positions who hoped one day that they too would, based on their experience and what they've learned over the years, have that opportunity. They're being told, you know what? That experience doesn't matter. That history doesn't matter. We're going to go backwards in time to somebody that embarrassed the state, that had to leave office in disgrace, and still has many unanswered questions about the nature of why he chose to make that resignation at that time.
I mean, that certainly would open up a lot of questions that he would have to answer. But I guess the question is, why? I mean, would the party even support this? And if so, why?
Yeah, well, I think that that's a question only that the party leaders, the Hudson County chair, the Jersey City Democratic chair can answer, the mayors of Hudson County who tend to run that organization.
And also, just to end it, also looking for new talent and for new leadership for up and coming and really helping to develop that talent, which doesn't seem that.
The Democratic Party, every political party ought to be always developing a bench. But, we see that that's not always the case. We see that a lot of times there are people who occupy those leadership positions for a very long time, crowding out the field, making sure there's nobody elevating themselves.
All right. Well, again, only in New Jersey. Never say never, because this is New Jersey and it's where anything can and has happened. So, John Wisniewski, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on all of these topics. We appreciate it.
Laura, good to be with you again. Thank you for the opportunity.
Joining me now is New Jersey Business and Industry Association's Chief Government Affairs Officer, Christopher Emigholz. Chris, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
How are you, Laura? Thank you very much for having me.
Very well. All right, well, we're going to talk a little bit about corporate business taxes. New Jersey has the highest corporate business tax rate in the nation. So what's being done to help keep businesses here in New Jersey?
Well, that's not something we're proud of. It's not something that's a good thing for our state or our state's economy. But the good thing is that Governor Murphy has proposed to allow the temporary surtax that makes us the highest in the nation to sunset at the end of this year. Right now, we are at 11.5%, which is the only state in the nation at double digits. The next highest used to be Pennsylvania at 9.99, but they just embarked on a multi-year bipartisan phase down to cut that in half. And we would love to get there someday, but right now, if we let this 2.5 percentage point surtax expire at the end of this fiscal year, at the end of this calendar year, we take us from 11.5 to 9. And that's a good thing for our economy, a good thing for our corporations, a good thing for jobs.
Why is it so high in the first place? I mean, that is a significant jump in comparison to our neighbor over in Pennsylvania.
Oh, hey, you're 100% right. It shouldn't be this high. But if you go back a few years, you'll remember that Governor McGreevey got us to the 9% rate. And it was a big campaign in New Jersey. You might remember the Save Sally. And there was a lot of folks talking about the jobs it would cause then. And it was unfortunately happened because there was a budget hole then that had to be filled. Same thing happened in the first year of the Murphy administration. There was a budget hole that Governor Murphy had to fill. BIA, the business community, would prefer that it be through spending cuts, through reforms, through finding efficiencies. That didn't happen. We'd probably prefer that it would be other tax increases besides the corporate tax, which I think has more onerous impacts on the economy. That didn't happen. The legislature and the governor decided to do this temporary surtax. And I say temporary because it is supposed to go away. Then what you had is after filling that hole, we had the pandemic. And there was great uncertainty around revenues and what would happen in the future. With that uncertainty, it was supposed to start phasing down during the pandemic. The governor and the legislature decided to extend it through December 31st, 2023.
Okay. All right. Well, what about the legislature and also in working with the administration right now? You know, it's go time. They have until June 30th to pass the budget. Are you hearing that the legislature, do they think the rates are too high? Do they agree? What's the feedback that you're hearing?
Well, the good thing is we're hearing on a bipartisan basis that there's legislators on both parties in both houses that want the surtax to go away. They believe it's a bad thing for New Jersey to be number one in the nation. Chairman Sarlo of the Senate Budget Committee has been a champion on this, and he deserves a lot of credit. The Republicans in their budget resolution requests last year and this year have both called for it to go away. The Assembly, we've seen some champions there. What we don't see is we haven't seen a commitment yet from legislative leadership. They haven't committed either way. I am hoping that's just a matter of timing and a matter of negotiating with the governor to get this done. But right now, the legislature is not in a bad place. They're just haven't committed to doing it yet. I think the legislature gets it. I think they know that jobs are created by a more moderate tax. BIA has never asked for the tax to go to zero. We know that we have a lot of strong things in our favor in this economy, such as our location, our infrastructure, our workforce. But we're not going to capitalize on those assets unless we have a middle of the road corporate business tax. If we have the highest in the nation, it costs us jobs, it costs us capital investments every single year.
Yeah. Well, and also New Jersey, they have some major, huge corporations. We are like the pharmaceutical capital of the country. So there are a lot of big companies, right, that, the corporate business tax impacts everybody, right? But there's so many smaller businesses, which really are the backbone. So can you talk a little bit about the disparity and how the corporate business tax impacts, like your big pharmas, as opposed to your much smaller businesses, 100 and under employees, or just single employees, mom and pop shops.
Excellent question. Excellent question. And that's really important to understand that the CBT, the corporate tax, impacts both. Number one, we're blessed, we're fortunate, we're lucky to have as many large multinational corporations that have a presence in the state. Those create great jobs with great wages, with great benefits. And it's about half the jobs in the state come from the big corps. And if we do something that makes those corporations uncompetitive, what impact does it have on half the jobs in the state that are the good jobs, are the jobs that we want to attract to New Jersey? The research and development jobs, the finance jobs, the jobs inventing the next vaccine, inventing the next thing that we're proud of that's going to solve some disease. We want that here in New Jersey. What also happens from the corporate tax is there's a supply chain issue. So those corporations in New Jersey are buying products from other smaller entities in New Jersey. They're using services from other smaller companies in New Jersey. They're having their taxes done. They're having their audits done. They're having buying cleaning services, buying food, buying you name the service, you name the product. By being in New Jersey, those large multinational corporations are spending a lot of money. They have less to spend if we have the highest tax in the nation. They have more to spend if we bring that down 2.5 percentage points. They would have even more to spend if we bring it down to middle of the pack in the nation. More money to spend means more money to invest in capital, more money to invest in jobs, more money to invest in R&D, more money to invest in making New Jersey the better economy that we all want.
Well, and you also drive around, and in a post-COVID world, so many companies, you see these huge buildings that are virtually empty. So it gets people thinking, well, people are working from home. And is there a concern that some of these big multinational companies might decide, you know what, it is too expensive to do business in New Jersey. Let's pull out. Let's go to Delaware, where business taxes are low. People work from home. It doesn't matter where the building is anymore. Is that a concern for some of these big companies in New Jersey and losing those companies?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head that the remote workforce is something we're going to have to grapple with in the future. I think right now there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know all the implications it's going to have, all the consequences it's going to lead to, but we do know there's uncertainty. And with that uncertainty and with that ability to do the same kinds of jobs, the same kind of research, the same kind of finance jobs that you might do for these multinational folks, you could do it in other states. You can do it right now. You might have a job that says New Jersey, but you've been doing it from Florida. Maybe we see this in New Jersey right now. You might have a job that's supposed to be a Manhattan job. You're paying Manhattan taxes, but you might not have been in Manhattan for months and months and months. And you might enjoy your bigger backyard in New Jersey and the benefits of being in Jersey. You might not like paying those New York taxes right now, but and that's another issue entirely. But that remote workforce, that remote shift, is something that there's good benefits that we're going to see in New Jersey. There's also some things to worry about. But I think given this uncertainty, we don't want to do anything to incentivize companies to think about working elsewhere or putting their employees elsewhere or taking their corporate headquarters and moving it elsewhere.
Yeah, that really is an interesting perspective too, about thinking about those jobs in New York. Now people are staying closer to home in New Jersey. And then, like you said, there's that domino effect of now they're having lunches here. Now they're having events and doing other things. Now, you yourself, you've worked with the Murphy administration going back last summer, working on addressing corporate business tax. So you can talk a little bit about your work specifically.
No, thank you for that. And this is an example of good government, the way it should be working. And I have to give credit to the Murphy administration and Treasury Department and the Division of Taxation specifically. Last summer, the Murphy administration approached NJBIA and several of our corporations and said, guys, we want to come up with a compromise CBT, corporate tax reform bill, that there's some things that BIA and the business community have been asking for years that we haven't done. We don't necessarily want to do. There's some things that we've wanted to do for years that you guys might not like. Let's see if we can come up with a win-win compromise and give us both what we want. And so over the course of a year, the business community has been working with the folks that collect our taxes and trying to figure out how we can make it easier for them and easier for us to do business in New Jersey. And what we came up with is a bill, and right now this bill is moving in the legislature, sponsored by the two budget chairs in the legislature, Senator Sarlo and Assemblywoman Pinter-Marin. And it's backed by the Murphy administration. The Division of Taxation testified in support of the bill when it was up in the Senate Budget Committee, as well as the business community. And this bill will, in a revenue neutral way, which is novel, it's not going to cost us more or it's not going to take money away from government. It will make our tax administration more competitive with other states. One of the big things it does is right now, New Jersey is a significant outlier, and it's a common theme, is kind of taking us from an outlier status and bringing us more in line with other states. We're an outlier in how we tax foreign income. We are more aggressive in going after foreign income for our corporations than almost any state in the nation, especially compared to our regional neighbors. Right now, New York and Connecticut, Massachusetts, all tax foreign income at a rate that we hope to get to if this bill passes. Pennsylvania actually does not tax foreign income at all. We're just asking to bring us in line with what most states in the country do and what our regional neighbors do. And if you do that, it makes just similar to the CBT rate we talked about a few moments ago. It makes us more competitive, and it has these multinational corporations that we want here more likely to stay here.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and to explain a little bit about what's going on and give that perspective of how New Jersey is stacking up against other states. And we appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate your time.
That's Christopher Emigholz from New Jersey Business and Industry Association. And that will do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.